record. Okay, so we're recording. So you can start whenever. I'm gonna try
Okay.
and well,
Okay.
I'll take my video out of it so they're not looking at me the whole time.
Okay.
All right, so you're all set and ready to go.
Oh, wait, I don't see me.
Okay. But well, just go ahead and start
Okay.
recording. I just didn't
Okay.
think
I
you'd
see. I see me and I see you. All
yeah.
right. So,
Okay.
this part of our YouTube stuff is about the Jonas family, and I'm doing this mostly for a friend of or a cousin of mine who's trying to get the Jonas history down. And my grandmother and grandfather. My grandmother was here from the time that they released Nebraska land after the I can't remember anyway. They came to Nebraska and started farming. Her father was a Folda. She was a Folda, and they claimed land in a little place called Hine, Nebraska, and they gave land to the church to build a church there, and they were very generous with their land. My great grandfather did not come with his family. He had been conscripted by the Austrian army, and I think he actually fell off a horse purposely and broke his leg so he could go AWOL and come to Nebraska and join his family, and that's what he did. My grandmother was the only girl in her family. Her father married a singula, and um, they had 7 children, and she died in the last childbirth of the last child, and the child died as well. She had 6 brothers. They developed banks in Nebraska, and they were very wealthy, and we know all that history. So I'm going to go on with the Jonases. They came later. Farms had been established. I think he was probably brought to this country to marry my grandmother because there were no other Bohemians around for her to marry. The Foldas were wealthy. I think they talked to a Mr. Jonas who lived in Racine, Wisconsin. This is all hearsay, but I think they called him and said, or talked to him and said, hey, we need somebody for Libouche to marry. And there's no Bohemians around here. So can you import somebody? And I think he imported his family, brought them to America, and he married my grandmother. Václav Jonas married my grandmother. I also don't know if anybody knows that her real name was Josephine. She was named after her mother, but we called her Libby all her life. Libby was the first queen of the Czech Republic. And I think she was named Libby because my great grandfather married a friend of my great grandmother's after she died. And I think she didn't want to hear the name Josephine around the house because that was her friend's name. And so I think she renamed her Libby. And that's also hearsay. I have no idea. However, my grandparents had a large family. And I'm going to start right there because Tom Jonas is helping me do the Jonas history. So he wants to know about my cousins because I'm probably the oldest surviving member with a memory now. So I'm going to start with the family. There were 8 kids, I think. And anyway, I'm going to start with my uncle Adolf, who had 4 kids. I think he was the oldest in the family. And he had 4 kids, my cousins and Tom's cousins. Jim was the oldest. Jim was a fantastic basketball player. Unfortunately, he got married very young and never made it to the pros, but I think he could have. That family, the Adolf Jonas's kids, were very intelligent kids and nice looking kids. Jim, all of them were very good looking. So it started with Jim, Francis, Dolores, and Jack. Jack has just passed away. His other siblings have all passed away as well. It was strange because Francis and Jack were very close, and they died on practically the same day. So it was very interesting that they both died on the same day. Jim became a big salesman for men's clothing at McGee's in Lincoln, Nebraska. They had a large family. and I don't know all of his children. I knew a few of them when they were younger, but I don't know them now. And I don't know what's become of them. Jim was fantastic salesman at McGee's. They loved him dearly, and he made a lot of money selling clothes. And his wife was a Bideau. Bideau's used to run the mortuary in town, and Carrie, I think, is still, no, Carrie's not alive. Anyway, they had a few kids as well, and that's about all I know about Jim. He was a great basketball player, University of Nebraska. Second kid in the family was Frances, who became a nurse. Our Aunt Alice was a nurse, and it was thought of when you became a nurse, you were better than a doctor because there weren't many doctors around, first of all, at that time. And nurses were at the bedside. And so there was nothing you could do in my family that was better than being a nurse. So Frances was a nurse. After Aunt Alice, she was the first nurse in the family in the cousins group. I was probably the second nurse in the family. And Aunt Alice was very good to us. But anyway, Uncle Adolph was in the First World War. He came back from the war. He went to France. He came back and he had his Marine uniform on, and he got off the train, and my Aunt Mame said she saw him and knew she had to marry him. He was the handsomest man she'd ever seen, and she loved him dearly. They loved each other dearly. They were a great example in their marriage. And Aunt Mame loved Uncle Adolph dearly. They had 4 kids. Anyway, Mame, I think, was a teacher once upon a time, but she didn't work. And she saw him get off the train because back in the olden days, when the trains came through, they had to stop in certain places. And all the women in that community would go out and meet the trains and give them cookies and milk and coffee and things to eat. And the soldiers really appreciated it. And that's where Aunt Mame first met Uncle Adolph, was when he got off the train to come home from France. And so the cousins in that family were brilliant. They were very bright people. They all had a career at a very young age. Dolores married one of the married another family, and his name was Curtis, I think. Anyway, they moved out of town. I didn't see her much. After high school, I mean, she kind of ignored me when we were in high school together because she was a senior and I was only a freshman. And freshmen in high school at that time were absolutely not thought of as much. And so she and I didn't have a good relationship exactly. And Dolores was like 10 years older. She was a friend of Katie's and Doris. The 3 of them were very good buddies. I did not know Frances very well, and I did not know Dolores very well. I knew Jack, and I didn't know Jim at all because he went to college when I was like, I don't know, 5 years old. So I didn't know Jim very well. He married a wonderful woman, though. His wife, being a Bideau, was very good, and they had a great relationship. And that's about all about the Adolphs that I can remember. Aunt Alice was a nurse. She got a full education, and she was expected to teach everybody else in the family. So she went away to university. Nursing was a wholly different profession when she was a nurse, but she was a very good nurse, and she replaced, I'm sure, a doctor in Clarkson, Nebraska. But she was a very good nurse. She
replaced a dark doctor? Is that?
Huh?
Did you say she replaced a dark doctor?
No, she replaced a doctor.
Okay. Sorry.
She took the place of a doctor. I'm sure there was a doctor there, but she probably knew more than he did. And she kept the town of Clarkson well informed about medicine and what they should do for their illnesses and things like that. She taught the others, and she was the recipient of all the education, I think, in that family. Mother only finished the 8th grade, and that wasn't unusual at that time. But Aunt Alice went to nurses training, taught them a lot about illness and what they should do. And she also taught them violin and piano because she got the lessons and nobody else in the family did. And as a result, my mother played both violin and piano, and I'm sure that Aunt Alice taught her that. She married a man by the name of Emil Petter, and he had been married before, and Aunt Alice took care of his wife. She was dying of cancer, and she was a private nurse at the time, and she took care of her until she died. And then she married Uncle Emil, and I'm sure that Uncle Emil was somewhat attracted to her because of the Fulda family. The Fuldas had become bankers, and they were very wealthy and doing very well. And Uncle Emil did well too, and he was doing well before Aunt Alice married him. But after he married Aunt Alice, he worked in one of the Fulda banks, and they became wealthy. He had one son, and Aunt Alice never had another child, which was too bad. She was very talented, and I'm sure she would have had a talented child. But anyway, Jerome Petter was her stepson's name. And his son was also called Jerome, and they moved out to, I think they moved to California at some point in time, and I never knew Jerome very well. Then the next person in line was Uncle Gus, and Uncle Gus never married and never had a family. He was a barber in South Dakota and did very well. He would come home often and see Grandma Jonas, and he always gave us $2 bills for our graduation. He'd give us 10 $2 bills, which was $20, but the $2 were very strange. I kept one forever, and I gave some of my grandchildren $2 bills because they were good luck as far as I was concerned, and that was about all. But anyway, that was Uncle Gus. No grandchildren from him. I mean, no children from him. Then after Uncle Gus came Aunt Agnes, and Aunt Agnes married Stanley Koenigsegg, and they had 4 Koenigseggs, and I had a pretty close connection with them because they all came to town for high school. We had country schools until the 8th grade, but then you had to come to town and go to school in Schuyler because that was the big high school and it was the only high school, so they had to come to Schuyler.
And the country school was kind of your one-room schoolhouse, or?
Our high school, no, the grade school was, a one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah.
The high school was, of course, a big school and much better than the grade schools, but they all learned a lot in those one-room schoolhouses because they didn't have separate grades. So the young kids learned a lot about the older kids' education and whatever. Anyway, the 3 Koenigsegg kids came and lived with my grandma Jonas. And at the time, I was living there also because my country school was closed when I got ready to go to school in my kindergarten year. And I didn't start kindergarten until I was 6 years old, and they promptly put me in 1st grade because that's where I belonged. And I guess I knew everything that they had to teach in kindergarten, so they put me in 1st grade. But anyway, I was staying with Grandma Jonas because I had to go to school in town as well. So God bless Grandma Jonas because she kept the 3 Koenigsegg kids and my brother and sister as well. By the time I was staying with Grandma Jonas, they were just about ready to graduate from high school. So I got to know Stanley a little bit, but not very much. Doris, I knew better. She and Katie were good friends, and they were there for a couple of years while I was there. And God bless Grandma because they were teenagers and up to all the things that teenagers did in those days. But Grandma put up with all of us pretty well. I did know Dick the best of all 3 Koenigsegg kids because he was there for 2 years while I was there. And he and I became very close friends until the day he died. He was married to a woman by the name of Mary Mlinark, and she was from North Bend, Nebraska. They had 4 children together, and I was godmother to their oldest child. But Mary divorced Dick after some period of time. I have no idea what the reason for the divorce was, but she divorced him, and Dick married another person from Nebraska, and they were together for the last years of his life and everything. She was very good to him, and they did not have any children together. That's it for the Konecheks. The next in line, I believe, was my mother. And as you know, we had 3 children. Martin and Katie, my 2 brothers, my brother and sister, were 10 and 12 years older than I was. We were close. They took care of me a lot. I was not unwanted, but I was unexpected. Mother had a little problem with that. They were my mom and dad a lot. All right. And we had a great life. We lived on a farm 4 miles west of Schuyler. My dad was very involved in electrifying Nebraska farms, and then even involved in electrifying national farms throughout the nation. Most farmers did not have electricity as soon as everybody else did. We got electricity into our farmhouse when I was born in 1938. Daddy became very interested in supplying farmers with electricity, and it changed a lot of farmers' lives. He was very well known in the circles, and we kind of thought this involvement of his was kind of funny and strange, and we didn't make a great deal of it. We kind of made fun of it. I didn't realize until practically my father died how important he was in electrifying farms throughout the United States. He was a big wheel. The president of General Electric came to our house one time to talk to my dad about getting appliances in the house and what they could do in the barns, and General Electric, supplying those things. My mother got an electric stove right after Daddy became president of the Nebraska Electrification Association. So anyway, the president came to the house one time, and Mom was dressed in overalls and tennis shoes, and she was very embarrassed when he came to the door, and so she hid in the living room. And my dad came in the house yelling for my mom, "Clara, where are you? Clara, come here. Clara, where are you?" And I said, "Well, Daddy, she's right here. She's hiding behind the desk in the living room." And Mother was very embarrassed and not pleased with my revealing where she was standing. Anyway, that was our family. Uncle Lambert was probably next. And Tom, I don't know if you know this, but in your biography of your dad, I noticed that there was one thing missing. When he got polio, he was working out in
And who got
the western
polio?
part.
Who?
Huh?
Who got polio?
Uncle Lambert. Uncle Lambert got polio when he was very young. He was working his way across Nebraska, and he told me this when I was very young. He was going to go to California and become a movie star. And I don't know if you know that or not. It wasn't in his biography, but he was going to go out there. He was very handsome, and very bright. And he was on his way. He was waiting tables, he told me, in a restaurant in western Nebraska someplace. And he got polio and had to go home. So he never got to Hollywood. And it's too bad because he was very good looking. Anyway, he married Aunt Aggie, who was a Lodel, and they had Tom and Mary. And I got to know Tom and Mary pretty well because they were younger than I was by quite a few years. And I babysat with them a lot. Tom was brilliant. He got married and had 4 kids, and was very well educated in the Catholic Church, and was very, very bright. So was Mary. Mary went to work in Omaha for a while, or Lincoln. I'm not sure which, Tom. I guess you can write her biography better than I did, but you were both very sweet children. Aunt Aggie was my biggest fan. She stood up for me so many times when my mom would have stopped things educationally and whatever. She was a very big help to me, and I appreciated her help so much. Uncle Lambert. Okay, I think Uncle Emil was the baby of the family. I was very close to his children. Unfortunately, they lived in Fremont, which was 30 minutes away. And at this time, of course, that's nothing. But at that time, you were lucky if you had a car that worked most of the time. And they didn't get to Skylar very often with the rest of the family when we celebrated holidays and things, but they were there, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, which was, not very often. But Eldon and Clarence and I became very close, and their younger brother came along later in life, David. Unfortunately, he was the first to die, and I didn't know him very well, but I did know Clarence and Eldon very well. Eldon's still alive, and he became a buyer for Richmond Gordon Clothing Company, which is a men's clothing store. And he went very often to Hong Kong to buy clothing and buy material to make clothing. And he was a very good salesman and manager at Richmond Gordon's. And then that went down and he became his own businessman. He owned a Dairy Queen for a while, and I don't remember exactly what else. Eldon is still alive, and you probably would like to talk to him sometime. He lives in Omaha. He just fell recently and broke his hip, but he's been very active until now. He's probably a couple years older than I am, but he's brilliant. So was Clarence. Clarence became a CPA in Denver, Colorado, and they have named a golf tournament after him there. He loved to play golf, and he was brilliant. He was a very good CPA and a good businessman. David became a salesman as well, and I don't know much about David. He moved away at a very young age, and I didn't know David very well. I did know Clarence's first wife. She was a student nurse when I was in nurses training. She was a couple years younger than I was. I knew her pretty well, and I should have warned Clarence, I guess, before he married her, because I didn't think she was a very good person, and I did think that Clarence was. And they divorced. She divorced him. She'd been carrying on with another person for a while, and that was very sad. And they divorced, and he remarried and had a wonderful relationship with his second wife. I didn't know her very well, and I still don't. I can't tell you much about her. I can't even remember her maiden name. Who else in the family? I went through Adolph, Alice, Gus, Agnes, my mom and dad, Lambert, and Emil. I think that's about it. I don't know if you can get anything out of this, Tom, or not. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me, and I can probably fill you in on some more interesting facts, but that's about it for now, I think.
Okay.
Uncle Emil was involved in Fremont, Nebraska. He ran a gas station for years and died very young. He was the youngest of the Jonas family, and he died first, I think. The Jonas, not the Jonas family so much, but the Folda family had a history of strokes and things like that, mostly strokes. A couple of the Folda boys died very young. They were 40 or 50 and died very young. And Uncle Emil was not very old either when he passed away. And I'm trying to think of who else. I think, let's see. The rest of them lived pretty good long lives. Mother died of a stroke, but she was 80 years old when she passed. Anyway, that's kind of the physical history that took a lot of the Jonas family.
Okay.
Agnes, the longest, I think. And I think that's about it. I don't remember. Clarence and Eldon and I were close friends as well. And I don't know why, because we lived, as I said, 30 miles apart, but we were close friends. I have a picture that I will send you, Tom, of the three of us with Grandpa Jonas. We were Grandma Jonas's favorites. Anyway, yeah. And I was definitely Grandma's favorite. I lived with her for 17 years. So I was definitely her favorite child. I kind of bowed into it somehow. And I'm sure she had some other kids who were favorites too, but I I consider myself her favorite. Anyway, I think that's about it. And Tom, if you have any other questions, please call me. And this was easier for me to tell you verbally about the family cousins, but I'm sure I've left some things out that you'd like to know. So give me a call. It was just easier for me to do this at this point in time because I know you wanted this in a hurry, and writing it out would have taken a long time. So this is what I have to say. You can write the family history or the cousins' family history, I think, from this a little bit. If, as I said, if you have any more questions, give me a call and I'll verbally fill you in. Okay.
Okay.
That's about it for now. Thank you.